Yeah. 1, 2, 3. I don't know. It's recording. I believe. Okay, if anybody understands the video camera, you can check, but I think I just turned it on.
You definitely don't want me to look at it.
Don't look at it. It'll probably blow up.
I want to make sure the power's on, yes, and
Uh-huh.
it says access. And the red light's on. I would assume it's going,
Okay, there you
that's
go.
all we can say.
That's
yeah.
when I did a 2-day theoretical neurolight training in LA. And it was 2 days, sort of in 4 parts, and I was wearing a lapel mic, which is not working for some reason, this one. And it had slipped under my shirt, and the whole afternoon was recorded and...
Garbled?
Yeah.
Yeah, like you're underwater a little bit?
Yeah. But anyway, I didn't say anything important, so it's okay.
Oh, yeah.
In the afternoon. Okay, so what we're doing here, let's focus in.
Okay.
They're over there, we're here. Before I go into the neuroplastic reinforcements, the idea of integrating movement, mental and sensory, are there any questions or comments, anything outstanding, anything more that you want me to talk about from kind of going backwards from the long-term brain shaping or the brain gym or anything even from the other day?
Would you just, because it's, I think, so helpful
Yes?
and understanding the reality of expectation,
Yes.
very quickly go over the different phases of functional plasticity, synaptic plasticity,
Okay.
Oh, I'd love that.
Those 4 things.
Those, I think, are just kind of key.
Okay. Right now the request is for me to do a kind of review and maybe further discussion, question answer, on the different categories or types of plastic change that occur. Obviously they build on themselves. By understanding them better, it allows us, I think, to have more confidence in our methodology and also communicate more clearly
Yes.
to those that we're working with.
Yes.
Okay, so I think you appreciate the fact that the terminology that I use is conventional within certain aspects. If I would have to describe my reference, my approach, it would be psychophysiology. This field is subdivided like crazy, like most fields are, and each of these perspectives tend to use their own language. Some of it overlaps, some of it doesn't, some of it is redundant, so I use language that has made sense to me from the various sources that I use. And I use multiple sources. I don't rely on one particular point of view. So what I'm saying is my best effort basically for me to understand it and then share that understanding with you. Because there are other ways of subdividing plastic change. But I won't bother with those because it can be confusing. Actually I will. Maybe it won't confuse. Because there's one that uses 3. But understand this is a different way of analyzing, right? So I can't say this is therefore it equals the other one. But by my recollection, it has similar terminology. It's synaptic, neuronal, and then there's a third one that I'm trying to remember, and I can't right now, but I'll use the word adoption for it. It's something compensatory, something, okay? Compensatory is one of the, but it's a 3-word title. Anyway, the synaptic is when you use the same the same roads, but you take different paths. Right? Same road, different path. That's not don't try to lay it over the other one, which I prefer, by the way. But they each offer their own advantage. So one is you have existing, I'll call them roads, and you learn to drive in different patterns on the same roads.
What was really
Okay.
helpful for me is that you did minutes, days.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that.
Okay.
And I'm just saying this other one because it does offer one interesting point. So, same roads, different patterns of driving. So you alter synaptic patterns within existing neurons. The other is neuronal, where you create new pathways to have new patterns. And the third one is something compensatory. I call it adoption. It's where parts of the brain are not functioning anymore, or maybe not even there, like in a war wound or car accident, where that part of the brain is not in the skull anymore. It's been destroyed. It's gone. So in a case like that, so it's either not functioning because it's dead, maybe from stroke, it's totally dead, or it's physically not even there. And what happens is other parts of the brain, usually close to it, proximate, not distal, proximate areas of the brain will adopt the functions from the areas that don't work or they're not there anymore. That's why I call it the adoption. It's something compensatory something.
Okay.
So that's the only reason why I paused and hesitated and then decided to tell you is that this is not usual for those of us working in wellness. This is really in the strict medical traumatic conditions. But it's an aspect of brain plasticity, is that the brain, to a limited degree, has the capacity to adopt functions from nearby structures. For example, if I think about my gibbons, if I lost my two middle fingers, they're actually cut off, they don't exist anymore. In my brain, the areas of the brain that control my index finger and my little finger would start to change to be able to make sense of how the structure has changed. So we'll just leave that as it is, because it's quite an extreme aspect. But in more normative times, if there are people that suffer stroke, like an ischemic stroke, and they want to come back from that, and you're working with them, the other four that I have kind of interrelate to the fact that they're not new neurons. It's actually a different part of the brain that doesn't normally control that will begin to adopt those functions. So it's quite an amazing aspect of the recuperative, survival, and adaptive aspects of neuroplasticity. So let's go back to the four, because they're the most meaningful to me because they relate most to the reality of practicum. Functional, synaptic, neuronal, systemic. Functional, synaptic, neuronal, systemic. Functional is the neuroplastic change that happens within minutes to hours, and may even be seconds in some cases, but minutes to hours is how it's usually described. So that's when the effects not only take place, but demonstrate themselves like really fast, like right now. It's the kind of thing where working with the neurolite, you can experience state change in minutes. In minutes, all right? So we always have that. Now the thing is that the expectation is that fast a change is using pre-existing capacities that have not been utilized for a while. I gave the example at some time, maybe it was Monday. I grew up in Canada, and then I lived around the world, but all my driving experience is on what we'll call the right side. Then I moved to Thailand, where I live now, and all the driving is on the left side. So it was very difficult because I spent the bulk of my life on the right side. It was a real cognitive effort because every reflex I had was wrong. And I was learning in Bangkok, where you can't help but be confused anyway. So anyway, I got to the point where I'm good. When I end up back here, this time, for example, it would be very quick for me to start driving on the right side again, which is like the correct side. It has a double meaning almost. But every once in a while, at the end of a very long day or something, I'm driving back to where I'm staying, and I'm wondering why. I won't say asshole on the camera because it'll record it. But why is that person driving straight towards me?
Yeah.
And I realized, oh, I'm driving on the left side of the road. I'm not in Thailand, and I go back to the right side again. So what it shows is that I had to unlearn driving on the right side to be able to drive on the left side in Thailand. But that unlearning wasn't necessarily lost. It just had to have context. And by context, boom, it comes right back again. So that's positive and negative. That's why a lot of it is by context. Famously, a recovering alcoholic will typically not want to go to a bar because the context reinforces old patterns that still have a bedroom in the house. It's very difficult to unlearn completely, like wipe out your experience, because it's your experience. That's why working with the limbic trauma loop is tricky stuff, because the body, the being, will never totally forget the trauma. It has a new relationship with the trauma. But once you've been traumatized, you've been traumatized.
The old road still can exist even though you built a new
Okay,
one.
now this is something that I didn't discuss before. It's good that you brought this up. It's called, in neuroplastic change, there is the expectation that not only will there be new synaptic patterns and new nerves, but the old ones that are now useless should be gotten rid of. So is there a delete button in the brain? And yes, there is. Yeah, and this is the trick of it. You have you've got all the vascular supply, you've got all the nerve cells, and you have all this other stuff, the glial cells, Glial. And a certain set of those glial cells have the job of basically destroying neurons. They kind of dismantle them, and I don't think they really eat them, but they're the destructors. And this class of glial cells go to work primarily when you sleep.
Okay, I'm fascinated.
Which is, if you have sleep deprivation,
It's a problem.
there's a toxic buildup of some neuronal waste that isn't able to...
Yeah, so how do these, it's not all the glial cells, but how do these special glial cells know what to destroy, what to dismantle?
Yeah.
The neurons that are not used frequently become targeted for destruction. That's the thing. If you lose it, use it. What's the thing? Use it or lose it. Well, in this case, if the pre-existing habits are not reinforced, you have an increasing likelihood that the glial cells will actually destroy and deconstruct those particular nerves.
So are you saying that pathway can completely
Bye-bye.
be shut up? That is amazing.
But it's a targeting that is one that is more on the long term. Because how many times, even in your imagination, does the person go back to wanting a drink, for example, right? Not really having, but wanting. Or, if it's attitudinal, I mean, there are 1,000 examples. I'm using the drinking thing because it's just obvious, right? Yeah, brilliant.
One of the things that's coming up a lot in science is something called autophagy. Are you familiar with that term?
Autophagy, no.
So it has to do with how, in a healthy state, the body will choose the old, funky, not working up to the level we want, particularly mitochondria, and get rid of them and replace them with healthy new mitochondria so that we can have energy. And it's part of the whole anti-aging thing, and the major place they're talking about is in the brain.
Okay, I'll have a look at that. I'm unfamiliar, so thank you. I won't comment it now because I'm ignorant about that.
And I'm wondering if the glial
Well,
is
it's
part of the autophagy process.
well,
Well, let's research.
We'll find out, you know. But right now, this is a break open area. Mitochondrial studies are break open. All of these things are break open. So, back to our reference at least, that there is a delete button. But the delete button, which are these specific glial cells that will destroy non-used neurons, is something that is, it's not as simple as we would like it to be, because we're using we're still referencing a lot of our bad habits.
It would be, you know, it's like could you never, ever look back at that road?
Well, a bar, and I mean, just
You
it
can
would be
drive
real
by a
hard
bar.
with addiction. But so
Well,
I hear you.
but this is
Yeah.
this is a functional state in the brain.
Okay.
It is a delete access where you're not just
Yeah.
changing the behavior, you're actually changing the structure related to the behavior.
I like the
So
word, the
amazing.
terminology that you used, pruning or trimming,
Yeah, it's called pruning is the
Yeah.
actual neuroplastic term.
because in my mind that's not necessarily chopping down the entire tree to give a misconception that it could be completely obliterated
Yeah.
easily, but
Yeah.
it's pruning away these dead branches associated with
Yeah.
the tree. Or something.
Okay, so functional is plastic change that can happen within minutes to hours. And that's a lot of the evident experience related to the neurolite. The experiences in the immediate time, even during the stimulation and following it, can be quite profound. You know, it's only 11 minutes,
Yeah.
and geez, you know, okay, you can listen to a song for 11 minutes. Oh, that was a nice song. Or see something for 11 minutes. So there's something of a different order happening, because it isn't just a report on the experience, it's state change. So that the functional, now my impression is that what it's doing is it's kind of resurrecting or bringing forward patterns of activity that already exist but haven't been activated or utilized for a period of time, because you can't change things that fast without there being some tilt in that direction. That's why I think it's related to a more complex aspect of capacity and demand. I think we have a lot of capacity for change. We have the capacity for joy, for example. It can just pop out of you. You don't have to spend months. It can surprise you. Or you can be surprised by your anger, or surprised by a sudden creative insight. You can have that. You know, one of the experiences other people report, I'll admit, is the source of a lot of my own creative process with the neurolite, is that I had many insights while I was having the light sound experience. As I was developing the different compositions, I didn't develop them all in one day, obviously, it took me time. And I would have to test and reproduce. I did 120 sound compositions first, took it down to 80, remastered 60 of them, and then I went in, now that I had those as a bass, what I call the drummer and the bass player, then I did all the light stuff. way overdosed, by the way, Miriam, to your point. I was sick for 2 to 3 weeks by the end of it, because I had spent literally weeks with hours every day immersed in sound and light signals. Well, hour after hour after hour after hour, and test. So it's a good way to feel bad.
I never slept so much in my life.
Okay.
I had to integrate so much.
Yeah.
So in the session, I would have these insights, this sudden understanding is, wow, yeah, that's right, I could do it, and they just kind of pop through. So, you know, the functional plasticity is really amazing. Really amazing. And I think, for example, for jazz players that on the spot improvise along and like dialogue back and forth and challenge each other back and forth and come in and come out at a much higher order than most any kind of I don't know, what is it called musically when you just sort of jam? Not just jamming together. They're really composing in the instant, in the moment.
Improvising.
Yeah, that improvisation, which is,
Amazing.
you know, the fascination and also the challenge of jazz, because they move in and out of linear relationships They'll have different rhythms and beats and keys, and they'll shift it sideways on you. And can you follow that or not? It's a very advanced form of storytelling while it explores a feeling. It's a very interesting evolution of music, which is an evolution of the brain. So functional plasticity is an area that is familiar to a lot of us in our common experience, where you can suddenly change. I mean, you hear something, a news, somebody tells you something, you can feel happy and you can feel angry and you can feel sad in the moment. Wow. And if you were rigged in a functional MRI unit, you would see the brain changing that fast. So functional plasticity, like for example, these aren't hard and fast. I would change them if I paid a lot of attention probably. But what I call the wow sessions. I chose, I don't know how many there are, but a bunch of them that tend to produce, for many people, particularly interesting or exciting experience. I call them the wows. You want to wow somebody, use one of those. And I tried to put some of the comments beside it. That wow factor, that's functional plasticity. That's a change right within, minutes. It's happening. It works in the help right now area. And, so you can become artful by working within that very, very short time frame of minutes to hours. It's where a lot of the proving happens. Okay. Synaptic, pre-existing roads, new pathways. That's in days to weeks. And then neuronal in months, where you're actually changing the structure and architecture, growing new nerves. And then the systemic, which is over the course of years, where the brain changes are integrated into the whole person, the whole being. So it somatizes into the psyche, the whole thing. Yes?
One of the distinctions that was really helpful for me with functional and synaptic was that there were new firing patterns of
Old existing.
Yeah. And versus functional.
The functional, okay,
which is,
I think what you're doing is I'm riffing right now, I'm improvising right now, but that I think what you're doing is you're resurrecting patterns that you have in your own personal library or at an organ level exist. That you could, as I said already, you can feel suddenly joyous, boom, and it's remarkable because you haven't felt that for a long time, but it's right there. So I think it must be like a ready, willing, and able, but kind of, it's like these are the bench players, they're sitting on the bench, and you call them in and they're ready to go. But they've already been trained, they're already in the team, something like that.
That makes sense.
I don't know, I'm like
It's
Mr.
because
Analogy.
we've tapped in before, felt it before, it's been a part of us before.
Well, we just look at how quickly things come. And yet, as I say, that I was having, and other people report this too, that you while you're in the session itself, you can have very creative and insightful problem solving. Just pop like that. It's like, where is that coming from? And I won't bother to theorize where it's coming from, whether it's from some, grand field of consciousness or some part of your head or your foot or something, I don't know.
so safe to say that, again, functional or pre-existing firings of synaptic patterns, synaptic plasticity are new firing patterns of pre-existing, new firings of pre-existing. And then neuronal are starting to make new roads with new cells, neurogenesis. the new neural synapses.
Yeah, and then
Literally growing.
systemic is integrating organ-wide, organism-wide.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know,
Okay.
that's sensible. I don't know if it's true, but it's sensible. I know that number 2, 3, and 4. I've not, by my recollection, found enough research on the functional to really be confident that that's what is happening. But I'm thinking that it happens that way. So I agree with you in that way. It's reasonable because it comes so quickly.
And based on our understanding of nerve physiology, that the neuroplasticity, when we're making new roads with these new nerve synapses, that's over a period of months, where synaptic is over a period of days to weeks, and
Yes.
functional is
Minutes,
from
minutes to hours.
Seconds, minutes to hours.
Yeah.
And then the
No, you know, I don't want to complicate it because, you know, there is research showing variables on these timelines. But
well,
this
to start with.
I think it's very useful at a practical level because you can talk to a person. Listen, it's going to take days to weeks, you know, for this to happen. So let's give it time. You have to do reinforcements, which is what we're going to talk about now, I think.
I think just it was helpful for me to have an expectation that I could explain to the person, especially if we're dealing with anything chronic, you know, and what their goal is, and so a realistic expectation, depending on the severity of the, you know, and the chronicity of what we're working with.
Yeah, I'm right there with you because communicating expectation is a huge part of it. And that good enough instead of perfect. Also, when I say in principle, first things first, or one thing leads to another, and meet them where they are and help them go where they need to go. All of these are, you know, they're kind of common sense experiences that practitioners have almost in any field, and now I think they're relatable in terms of neuroplasticity. Okay, let's talk about getting the most out of the Neurolite. The Neurolite is an instrument that works with the sensory avenue for neuroplastic change. There are 3 in total, generally speaking, avenues for neuroplastic change. One is what we could simply call movement, or the motor, or the kinesthetic, how you move your body. The other is mental, how you think and use your cognitive process, the ability to think and imagine and visualize and so on. And the third one is through the sensory signals. And in this case, I'm using light and sound as the avenue. One area of neuroplasticity that's being explored totally fascinates me. University of Wisconsin for quite a long while, and it's a device called the PONS, which is an acronym but happens to be a brain part, PONS, PONS. And it's an electric device, very, very subtle, almost you don't feel it, so it's I don't know technically, but it's probably down in the microcurrent range. And it's put on your tongue.
Interesting.
On your tongue. In the mouth, on the tongue. And they experimented with all sorts of frequency sets and random sets and everything, and they refined it. It's more than 15 years of solid research. 3 principles, I think one of the 3 have even passed away. And I've spoken to, there's a company trying to take it consumer, and actually I ended up meeting the guy who funded the company by chance. He came to a Neurolite presentation. And this stuff is in the realm of like crazy good. As it turns out, of the senses, we'll say classically 5, right? Sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch. Taste and smell are so close. You know, the tongue, the taste is very rudimentary. And usually what we smell is the elaboration of what we think is the taste. Anyway, they put this thing on the tongue. The thing about the tongue is that it neurologically connects right straight into the brainstem and the beginning base of the limbic system. And when you think about it, you know, the explanation is that as creatures were evolving, that they go along and they're sniffing and tasting. The tongue is always, and you know, for most any even human baby, you find something in the mouth, it goes. That there is such a primitive, rich source of signaling into the brain through the tongue. So what they do, because it's a functioning, you know, experimental clinic at the university, is they'll put this on for a relatively short period of time. I don't know all the methodologies, but basically my recollection is they put it on for 20 minutes. Here we are back in that same 20 to 24 thing, that 22 that I talked about on Monday, that you may have heard about before. Why it's 11:11 and so on. And the thing is that it's non-vectored. It creates a tremendous neuroplastic potential. And guess what the time period is that they do the vectoring?
20 minutes.
No, within 2 hours.
Oh, okay.
Right? So there's a tremendous potentiated state, but it's non-vectored, that you have to do some, typically they do a lot of motor stuff. You have to do some movement or some mental, they specialize in the movement aspect. Right? So they'll use movement to vector the neuroplastic potential created by the stimulation into the brainstem from the tongue.
Isn't one of their areas of specialty specifically stroke victims?
All kinds of neuromotor conditions, all kinds. Parkinson's, MS, everything. And I think in one of Deutsch's books, I think he talks about that.
He does, and this is the lab that has the corner of canes that people leave behind.
Yeah, it's like
after,
Lourdes, the Lourdes of neuroplasticity.
After their
they come
program
in
with them, there's literally a corner in the lab filled with canes.
Yeah, they come in with canes and walkers, and within a short period of time, meaning a few days to weeks,
2 weeks, yeah.
right, which is synaptic plasticity, they have these people on treadmills.
Which came in either in wheelchairs,
Wheelchairs or walkers or
canes.
canes.
Yeah, that's that lab.
That's that lab.
Yeah, in Wisconsin.
So,
What's the name of the university?
Wisconsin. And if you research PONS neuroplasticity, and I forget what it's an acronym for, but that's what they've named the device. And I forgot the name of there's a company trying to commercialize it, and I've bothered them a lot.
What was so
But
interesting,
it's not out yet.
it gave me a bigger appreciation about how much smarter the body is than we are still at this point, is I think they were trying with the PONS use initially to target certain parts of the brain,
Yeah.
certain frequencies, and what they realized is that the system of networking was so much more integrated and complex than we gave it credit for, that they did a general stimulation,
that's
and
right.
that's all that was needed.
Well, what it does is it potentiates